I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Rutland City Board of School Commissioners. Please rise and recite the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary note that Stephanie Stingley is...
Yes.
Is that Stephanie?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is absent. Everybody else is in attendance. Before we approve the agenda, I'd just like to make a couple of quick changes. Under central office reports, B and C are going to be flipped. C will become before B. And under committee reports, B, that is not an action item.
And the personnel memo needs to be updated, correct, Bill?
Yep.
Yes, please.
And that's under the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Okay. Any questions on the agenda itself?
Do we need a motion to change the agenda?
Oh, do I hear a motion to change the agenda for those two?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Two opposed, duly noted. Four.
That's-
Okay.
Four opposed.
What's that?
I believe, maybe we should do a roll call.
Roll call vote? I'll do a roll call vote. Okay, Aaron?
Yay.
Do we have discussion before we vote?
We normally don't on the agenda item. What discussion?
I'm just wondering why it's being changed.
The changes in those two was because Mr. Olson asked me to change that. And the ad hoc committee is because we're missing a member. And when I spoke with Ms. Goldberg, she felt that she'll just give a brief report today. And then any recommendations come out of there have to go before, what does it say? The entire board?
Well, the recommendation can be adopted by the board at any point, but if we want to allow Stephanie to be part of the discussion, then we can postpone it. Any action, recommendation of adoption, the report to next time. But
And, go ahead.
I'm going to give the report, which is nothing outside of what is already known to people. And there's no really action item associated with that right now.
Okay, and that's what Tina said. Allison?
We have never removed an item from the agenda because a committee member was not there.
I'm not removing it. I'm just saying it's not an action item. I'll just leave it there.
Well, it's warned as an action item, so on the agenda, it is an action item. You would need a motion and a vote to remove it as an action item.
Okay.
And we have never altered business of the board for one member not being present.
Fine.
There's the-
Well, I'll leave it on there as an action item. And if there is no, if the action would just be accepting the report, I'm assuming?
That's the only action I can see
Okay.
coming out of the committee. There's no, I did not prepare any action item except for giving the report.
Okay.
So,
And that's what we'll do then. We'll leave it that way.
It is warned as moniker mascot action item.
That's because that's what, I didn't know what else, what it was really doing. That was the original. There is no intention.
That's what the committee was for.
That was what the committee was for, and therefore, tonight, we can accept, we will take the report, and Dina can make an action item to accept the report and put it in the minutes. Yes.
No, the committee charge, as I understood it, was to make sure that the vote was done properly. It was a process investigation.
Right. And so, that's Dina, when I spoke with Dina discussed that, about it being, there's really no action item per se. I do know that there is potentially an action item about the small boards, using Robert's rules for small boards, but that I think the full committee, the full board should be here for. And that's what I was doing. I think it's just going to be, the action item will be the acceptance of it, of the report. Yes, Allison?
So why is it warned as moniker mascot?
If you're reading something into it, Allison, don't. That's because that's what the ad hoc committee was for, talking about the mascot monitor. I didn't know what else to call it, that's why I put it there. It's really for the ad hoc committee report to be entered into the minutes, that's all.
Well, mascot and moniker was never used further on the ad hoc committee. Specifically, the ad hoc committee was not to give out a recommendation on mascot and moniker
You're
for
right.
their charge.
They're not.
And that was a recommendation, yet you warned a mascot moniker
That
action
is-
item
that is
and have
not-
spoken to many members of the public that a vote would be held tonight. And then you have changed that because
have.
one member is not present.
I have not spoken to many members. I actually have said, and if people would quote me right in the Herald, but unfortunately, it's not done that way. The bottom line is this: it's the will of the board. And the board, and all I'm asking for is tonight for the committee to make their report. I just felt that it would be best having all committee members here for the report, but I get it. I don't have a problem with that. And then Dina will make the committee report, and then we'll accept it as an action item. She will make the motion to accept the report into the minutes. There'll be a second, and then we'll accept it that way. Period. Yes.
Can we get the resource officer out here,
Okay.
please?
Good idea. Bill? So, needless to say, we will not amend it, but I will look for an amending for the agenda for B, C before B. So do I hear a motion to amend the agenda C before B under central office reports?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of changing the agenda C before B?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda has been accepted. All right, let's look at the regular agenda, the consent agenda, minutes of the previous meetings, and the personnel memorandum. My understanding is there's an addendum to the personnel memorandum?
Just one change on one of the dates, if I can remove that out of the consent agenda.
Okay,
There's a date at the top, it says October 8th, 21.
yeah,
That should be September 30th.
okay. So the change that's in there is that under Chris Schuler, the effective date should be September 30th, 21, and not 10/8/21 on the personnel memorandum. Okay? Yes,
Can I pull out the finance committee just for some verbiage?
sure. We'll pull out the finance committee from the minutes. Is there anything else that anybody would like to be pulled out?
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda with the minutes of the finance committee pulled out? Do I hear a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And finance committee.
Just in the second to last paragraph regarding the motion to go into executive session, I kind of garbled it, but I would like it to read, I think it would be clearer if it read, for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations, general public knowledge of which would clearly place the board at substantial disadvantage, and motion carried unanimously. I can send it to Bill.
Okay, could you send that to Bill? Okay. Any other changes to this? Would you like to make?
Second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Allison. All those in favor of the minutes from the finance committee, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so carried. After our meeting last month, after our training last month, we're going to start with a quick protocol review. Protocol review, which everyone has an enclosure on. And so here is the protocols that we operate under. Is the board will represent the needs of interest of all the children in our district. The board will lead by example. While we encourage debate and differing points of view, we will do it with care and respect. We agree to ask the board chair or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting unless the issue is emergent and requires immediate action. The board will encourage others to follow district policies on complaint procedures by presenting concerns, problems, or proposals to the person who could properly and expeditiously address the issue. To be efficient and effective, long board meetings should be avoided. If a board member needs more detailed information about an item on the agenda, the board member should contact the chair or superintendent in advance of the meeting. Items brought up during the meeting that are not on the agenda may be tabled until a later date. The board will consider research, best practice, public input, financial impacts in its decision-making. The board will speak to the issues on the agenda. Facts and information needed from the administration will be referred to the superintendent for follow-up. The agenda will allow time for focused discussion on board and district goals and outcomes and alignment with strategy and practices. Board members will honor the confidentiality of executive session. Any questions? Okay, and I believe we do have an executive session. Oh, there's more on the back. Thank you. All right. The board commits itself to continuous improvements and goal setting through semi-annual retreats at a minimum. And this is a reminder, the second meeting in October will be our goal setting meeting. The board and superintendent will facilitate goal setting for the district. Board members will come prepared to meetings. Individual board members do not have authority. Only the board in total has authority. The board chair or his or her designee will be the board spokesperson. When board members serve on various non-board committees or attend such committee meetings, the board member's role is that of a liaison to the board, and when addressing the committee, shall be as an individual. The board will establish the vision, create policies, and ensure accountability. The superintendent shall manage the schools. Questions? Okay. Are there people in the audience that would like to address the board for items that are not on the agenda? Okay. Come up. When you come up, I'd like you to state your name and your city of residence. I only saw a couple hands, so we'll go. Anybody else besides? Okay.
You guys together or one after the other?
One after the other.
Okay, we have 10 minutes for public input. You're the only two, so you can have up to 5 minutes apiece.
Hi, my name is Heather Hoc. I'm a resident of Rutland City, and I'm here tonight as a concerned parent for what I've seen going on within our school system as far as regulating masks on children. My children are in 3 different Rutland City public schools, and over the last few weeks, in a couple different schools, they have been pulled aside and picked apart because one member of the education community felt that they were uncertain if they approved of the appearance of their masks. This is a public education system. After what last year was, how much our children have been denied of their education, the goal is to keep our children in school and help them get the education that they deserve and are entitled to. Seeing children pulled out of class and set aside for no reason other than evaluation, I feel is incredibly inappropriate. It's not just my children, it's other children as well. Some parents don't even know what's happening. Some parents don't have the time to come to meetings because they're working. But specifically, last week, my son was pulled out of class twice for 2 hours and left sitting in a room by himself while the members of the school decided how they felt about his mask and if it was appropriate or not. At the end of the day, he was left to return back to his class because it's all opinion. His mask does cover his mouth and nose. It is 2 layers of fabric, but because someone felt it unsure, he was denied education for 2 hours that day, 2 hours another day, and then left to return to class. My 7-year-old daughter, who happened to be walking by the nurse, was pulled in and told, quote unquote, her mask is for decoration only, and told to wear a paper mask. She's 7 years old and shy. She would never say boo to anyone. She would definitely not say no to administration or a teacher. So she took it because that's what children do. And then the nurse proceeded to ask her, do your parents wear masks? Do they wear masks in public? Are they vaccinated? What do you know? My daughter came home crying because she felt attacked. This is so inappropriate, and it's going on in our schools because of opinion. These children are wearing masks that are covering their mouth and nose. They are 2 layers of fabric. The state gave us the guidance to, quote, they recommended masks. The CDC guidance says have 2 layers of washable, breathable fabric that covers mouth and nose, that fits snugly against their face. This is from the cdc.org website. Have a nose to prevent air leakage. That is it. Other than that, these children are being broken down on opinion. Who's to say your opinion is right, or your opinion is right, or your opinion is right? This is all opinion. And at the end of the day, we're in a society where people are being broken down left and right, and these children don't deserve that. They want to be in school. So to pull them aside and deny them education is wrong. My 7-year-old cried today. She asked to be remote. And that's not even an option anymore. So I ask the board to evaluate what is going on in our schools and advise our teachers to teach our children. That is their job. If they are coming to school compliant, they are being respectful, they are engaged in class. There's no reason any child in Rutland City should be denied the right to education because someone's opinion. Thank you.
My comments are in line with what Heather was talking about, but
Your name, please, and where you reside.
Oh, my name is Cynthia Laskovich, and I reside in Rutland City. And I put together a quick statement, and I'm not challenging whether or not we should be wearing masks. And just to throw it in that I have yet to meet a teacher I don't like. But there currently is no mask mandate, and I saw from the letter from Bill Olson that it was put locally in the hands of the board. And I understand the policy that all kids, from the letter. Number 5, masks continue to be required for students younger than age 12 until vaccine availability changes or until the AOA VDH shift recommendations. And then at the beginning of the Rutland Intermediate School Handbook, within the introductory letter dated September 1st from the principal and assistant principals, it says, at this time we are requiring all people vaccinated and unvaccinated to wear a mask while inside our school building. Beyond that, there isn't a specific definition of what is required. And let's see. But to have specific requirements implies that the recommendations come from persons or organizations qualified to make specific medical device recommendations, and that they can also attest or document the effectiveness and appropriateness of the device, that is a mask, requirements. If you think about sports equipment requirements, as well as the release of liability statements that parents sign, think about concussion protocols. The coaches aren't making them up. These are coming from experts. The district has carefully developed policies relying on experts like the American Academy of Pediatrics, Little League, and other organizations we rely on to have accurate and reliable recommendations to keep kids safe. But the experts don't include teachers, as much as I love them. Teachers do not have the credentials to determine which masks are effective for the intended purpose and which are not. Neither do administrators, neither really do any of us. There is good reason for very general mask guidelines. No mask manufacturers are claiming that their products will block the transmission of this or any other virus. The manufacturers are notoriously silent about the effectiveness or lack thereof of their product when it comes to the transmission of the disease. I just want to show you something. This ad just happened to pop up this morning online. Sounds real good. Premium USA-made ASTM Level 3 surgical masks by an Ambush American is an FDA-registered manufacturer. When you look at it closely, it says it can block particles down to 0.3 microns. Okay, 0.3 microns on this surgical mask. But the coronavirus has a diameter of 0.06 microns and 0.14 microns. So this wonderful looking mask, it can go right through. If you look at another chart that I have, it shows that viruses, by and large, they're the smallest thing there. And just for the fun of it, this is from the movie Outbreak. This is how they protected themselves from virus. So we're kind of like splitting hairs when we start trying to judge the masks that kids are wearing, when the really good-looking ones only have limited effect according to their own definitions of what they can do. Papers. But given the lack of definition of masks that are effective in the prevention of the spread of this virus.
One more minute, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Okay. When it comes to what types, the simple best answers is don't go there. Tell the teachers don't go there. Parents have the authority and discretion to determine the best mask, a medical device for their child. Because the school district could be left hanging with possible liability if they make representations like, oh, this one's going to work. They don't know that, and then there comes in the question of masks get dirty. I think there's kind of a famous study that parents had done showing all the pathogens that ended up being on the mask. I would simply say, when it comes to the type that kids are wearing, don't pretend that we know which ones will work and which won't, and people who are interacting with the staff, interacting with the kids, they shouldn't go there. Don't tell this mask is good, I don't like this one, and then they shouldn't act in response to their opinions. Let it just be a policy.
All right, thank you both. Okay, student representative report.
Hello. So RIS just held their open house for families. It was a good experience to be able to meet families in person, outside, masked of course. Our September character trait has been focused on compassion. This is a trait we have seen in practice by our families for the understanding and support they have shown during classes being moved in person and remote. Our first PBIS assembly will take place virtually at the end of the week. We will also be kicking off our first PTO fundraiser of the year, selling chocolate bars. This has proved to be a success in the past years, and we are excited to bring it back. Can you really ever have too many chocolate bars? If you are interested in purchasing a candy bar or two, please contact an RIS student or the main office at RIS. For Northeast and Northwest, our summer kinder camps and kindergarten orientation help to ensure a smooth and happy start for kindergarteners and all of our children at Northwest and Northeast schools. Throughout the month of September, primary school teachers focus on routines and procedures for playtime, learning time, and even mealtime. With the first month of school close to finishing, teachers and students spend more time on academics each day. Northwest enjoyed an open house, otherwise known as Meet the Teacher Night, on a lovely evening last Wednesday right on the Northwest playground. Children brought their families to designated locations on the playground to meet their teachers, and then the families strolled through the outdoor classroom to learn about other opportunities to engage at school. Northeast School will be holding a virtual open house and Title I meetings on September 29th with virtual tours of the room and teachers' presentations of curriculum, routines, and ways for families to stay engaged. Northeast and Northwest are having their Cliff Year of the Book kickoff in the near future, with Northeast's occurring during the school day on September 30th. Over the next several months, students at both schools will embark on a fun and creative book-filled year, with goals of seeing how books and reading can take them anywhere in the world and beyond. For Stafford, on September 20th, Vermont Secretary of Education Dan French visited Stafford to gain an understanding of how our school is operating during the COVID-19 times, and to see how the Esr Grants funds were put to use in the programs. Students greeted the secretary in each program and toured him around their labs, and spoke about the work they are doing. Secretary French also took the time to visit the RHS nursing team to thank them for their tireless work during the pandemic. On September 16th, Stafford held a virtual back-to-school night. Families were able to visit the program instructors and get a virtual tour of the program space, as well as a meeting with academic instructors, school counselors, and administration. We recently held elections at Stafford to select our 3 student representatives to our regional advisory board. Congratulations goes to the first-year student Jeanette Teachment, who is in digital arts from RHS, second-year student Colette Boynton, human resources and from Otter Valley, and our second-year student Devin Bathlon, who's in health careers from MSJ. These 3 students will make a great team. Thank you.
At Rutland Middle School, students are falling into normal routines in global studies, STEM, and unified arts classes. Each house has a student-generated list of values and agreements that they will use for the year. In addition, each house created a banner that they feel represents who they are as a team. They have implemented community meetings during which each house gets together for social emotional learning and team building. These have been incredibly successful and well received among the students. Now moving on to RHS. RHS has initiated a theme this year focused on social and emotional learning. This effort kicked off at the start of the school with advisory activities focused on getting to know one another, goal setting, and dealing with stress. This effort will continue throughout the year with ongoing advisories every other Monday. Last week, the high school enjoyed Spirit Week, in which students participated in Pink Day, America Day, Pajama Day, and Team Jersey Day. The week was capped off by Homecoming Weekend, which included many home athletic events that were well attended. Thank you to the student organizations who helped to make this fun week a possibility. This year, Allen Street campus has committed to reducing school waste by composting old food and kitchen scraps on site, separating recyclables, and composting to grow organic produce and perennials this spring. They are proud to report an 85% reduction in landfill waste, 100% composted food scraps, doubled in recycling, and added in the addition of 3 buckets of scraps to our compost and warm bin daily. Their goal is for ASC compost to become the main source of nutrients for the High Tunnel project and drastically reduced waste in the process. We are looking forward to seeing the impact we can make this year and hope to scale up in the future. That is all I have. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions, comments for our 2 student representatives? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you, girl.
We are on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Harley. I asked to switch the order a little bit, just because my comments are going to lead into some of the principal's comments, so that was the reason for that. And I wanted to repeat what we just spoke about, that Secretary French came to Stafford and spent a full 2 hours visiting all the programs and doing nothing more than just talking to kids and getting a sense of what Stafford is all about. So we appreciate the time that he gave. He has a very busy schedule. To spend 2 hours with us was fantastic. We appreciate that. In this portion of the board meeting, I want to make sure we're focusing on some of the bigger statewide. Well, I'm focusing on some of the bigger statewide issues that are affecting the schools, or some of the legislative issues, and I don't want to be redundant with some of the things that are talked about through the year with when we're talking about curriculum and assessment, or talking about the weighting study, for instance, or facilities, or any of that. So I'm just trying to focus on those big picture items, and in this case, I hope we can lead into what's happening in the buildings. So here's a statewide issue that could have affected us, but isn't going to. The state was trying to go towards a system that would help facilitate a statewide data management system for finances and for human resources. The name of it was called the Shared School District Data Management System, the SSDMS. And I wanted to let the board know that that is not going to happen at this point. They've changed their course. They had they did have an implementation of this process for the past about a year and a half, I think, Ted. 3 years. Oh, sorry, Ted. 3 years. And we were scheduled to enter into this process as well. The process has had its bugs, and they've had some concerns about it. So the state is going to back off of that, which is, I think, a relief for Ted and also for the business office, because there was serious concerns about how this was going to work. Which is not to say that something like this might not happen in the future as they try to work through getting more uniform in how they work with these issues. But that's one announcement statewide that's a positive for us. On the local side, of course, the pandemic is what we're focusing on. I'll tell you that I was talking to one of our principals yesterday, and the principal said, I spent just the entire day working on COVID topics. So it's really on our plates right now, and I want to start off by saying we really have to be thankful for the staff, the nurses, the administrators that we have in this district. And I know that the nurses have worked many hours past the school day, and the administrators as well, past the school day, working on contact tracing and trying to make sure our schools are safe and healthy. So I want to thank them personally. I need to thank them every single day. For context for the district, right now, we did a count to see where are we at, and we knew that as we came back to school, we would have cases, and the Delta variant is part of the equation there. So we counted from last Friday to Friday, the 2 previous Fridays. And to be blunt, we've had 23 cases. So we've had a number of cases in the district with our students. And, what that means, for instance, for the high school is when you have a case, you are trying to check to see where that student went, what classes they were in, and what kind of close contacts they had. Greg told me that the cases that they've had at the high school recently have required 158 students to be contact traced. So that's a lot of effort on the part of the staff there, and a lot of concern as well for the families. 158 students contact traced. Out of that 158, though, we had 33 that would have to quarantine, because if you are vaccinated and not showing symptoms, you don't have to quarantine. So 33 are in quarantine at the high school. With the younger students who are not able to get vaccinated under age 12, if they are a close contact, they have to quarantine. So as of yesterday, we had 279 students, 279 across the district that are in quarantine, and that's 14% of our student population. So it's a serious issue. We're trying to work through it, and we want to make sure our kids are in the building, but please understand this is something that we're trying to stay on top of and trying to make sure our kids are safe. The solution from our perspective is we want people to get vaccinated, and the more high school students get vaccinated, we know that they're going to be safer. As a matter of fact, there is a clinic this Thursday, September 30th, at RHS. So if you're looking to have your student or yourself vaccinated as an adult, anybody age 12 and up can go to that vaccination clinic. You don't have to be a member of the high school. You don't have to be a member of the school community. It could be someone from the outside as well. And you can get vaccinated at RHS on September 30th. As far as younger students, from what I've heard, and we just had a meeting with Secretary French today, they're going through the process nationally, of course, with the vaccine for younger kids. They're going through the research process, and he expects possibly by November that we'll be able to roll out vaccinations for students at that age level. So they're trying to get ready for that and make sure that they can quickly and efficiently move towards vaccination for them. Another piece of our approach to mitigation strategies is we are trying to make sure we are very clear about who is vaccinated and who isn't. but we're doing this voluntarily. So schools have sent out, the schools that have kids that can be vaccinated, so that would be RMS and RHS and Stafford, have sent out, forms that allow you to tell us if you're interested in telling us whether or not you're vaccinated, and you have to be able to show your vaccination card to prove evidence of that. That allows us to do a much faster process with contact tracing. So we would be able to have a list to be clear of. We don't have to check any of these kids; they're all vaccinated. But these folks who might have been close contacts are not vaccinated, so we have to make sure that parents are clear that they might have been exposed. So the process works like that. If you don't turn in the form as a parent, we assume that your child is unvaccinated. So it's your choice to do so, but we're assuming unvaccinated. So we're asking parents, if your student is vaccinated, please pass in the forms to make our process more efficient. The process is evolving as the conditions for the virus change across the state. The Agency of Education and the Department of Health have made some adjustments. So originally they had said that they thought that some of our mitigation strategies could go away if we had up to an 80% vaccination rate in a building after 10 days of the first 10 days of school. They've changed that a couple different times just recently as of today, and they're going to say if we get up to 80% of students vaccinated, we could consider backing off on some of those mitigation strategies as of November 1st. So we'll see how that plays out. What the Agency of Education also now is rolling out is another way to maybe do less with the focus on contact tracing and more on the focus on testing. So they have a new system that they're calling Test to Stay. And if you were exposed, the way it's explained to us is if you were exposed as a student and you were unvaccinated, you would still come to school. You wouldn't have to quarantine, but you'd have to test to be able to come into school. So they'll use some antigen tests to make sure that the student is either positive or not positive. If not showing positive, you'd come into the building, and as I understand it, the test would go over a series of days. I think it was explained as 7 days in a row to see if a student is showing up as positive. And that would allow kids to stay in the building and not have to quarantine at home. Again, I believe that's going to be voluntary. The positive is kids would be in the building, wouldn't have to quarantine. The negative is it will be a lot of work. And so I hope people understand, again, we're trying to keep everything afloat and keep it moving, but it's a lot of effort on the part of our principals and staff and the nurses. So I am urging vaccination. It is important that we keep our community safe, and we're seeing positive effects of this. I'm also urging some of the mitigation strategies that we talked about for the last year and a half: hand washing, being aware of symptoms, and making sure if you feel sick, you're not coming into the building. Okay, we've had cases where people have felt sick and have come into the building and have subsequently proven positive, and then we had a lot of close contacts as a result. We want to keep the buildings open. We want our kids in the buildings. There are schools around the state that have had to close for temporarily anyway, and we don't want that to happen to us. So we're asking for the help of the community, and we're all moving towards the same goal, trying to make sure our kids are getting an education and staying safe and healthy. So we're really trying to make this work, and it's a challenge, but we can do it. So we've got to work together. So with that said, Hurley, if I could have a couple of our principals come up and speak.
Can I just ask if there's any questions?
I was going to say, I actually have a question.
Sure, sorry.
So when you speak to, keeping everybody safe, you can look at that in multiple ways. I think the word safe is very subjective. Safe should be the ability to wear a mask if you choose to wear a mask. And also you have the option to be vaccinated. Parents who choose not to have their child vaccinated or choose not to be vaccinated are the ones accepting an inherent risk when they do that. So that being said, we are going to be having COVID for a great many years. Variants are going to come. We're not eradicating this. So at what point are we going to look at the bigger picture
because we do know that people that have been vaccinated are very much carriers of the COVID. So by singling out children and saying you are going to be tested because you're not vaccinated is in essence isolating them and calling attention to them. And I don't know that that is a good rule of thought. Another concern I have is I consider myself a very rational person, a intact household, married couple. I don't have additional stressors in my life, like a dysfunctional home life. I mean, I consider us fairly functional, my husband and I. But when my son was kept home because he had, quote unquote, been around somebody who had potentially exposed him, to me that seemed very much, reminded me of the Ryan White. I don't know if you remember him, but the AIDS fellow. And it was, one of these things where everybody was running scared and, I don't dare drink from this water fountain and this and that. And really what I think we need to get back to is we need to be looking at the bigger picture, which is statistics are showing children are overcoming this. On a whole, healthy adults are too. So that being said, I mean, for my son to miss out on school for 7 days because he could be positive, to me is just unbelievable that we are going through these times where we can actually hold somebody out of school because they could have COVID. So that being said, I'm kind of getting in, I'm sorry. That night that I got the call and I realized that he couldn't go to school, I was extremely stressed. I mean, I have flexibility in my life. My husband has flexibility in his life, but my attitude got really bad really quick. And I thought, I've seen children in schools, they come from houses where there's abuse, there's drugs, there's molestations, there's all kinds of stuff. I can't imagine that family member getting that call that your kid could be ill and you need to stay out of school, and the stress and the abuse that that child has to encounter because parents are already struggling or they've got mental health issues, and this child is staying home in that environment. We're really doing them a disservice, and to me, I find it very unsettling because I'm a logical person, but I feel for all those children that are in these situations that they're in these houses and they don't have the option of a normal life because they could have COVID, and they look forward to coming to school every day because that is their break from their personal hell, and it gives them hope. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, and I think the new test to stay, addresses a lot of that concern. Brittany, and then Ann, and then Allison. Sorry, I think that's the order.
2 things. Thank you. I know we have principals out here. So thank you very, very much for all that you guys are doing, and Bill and Rob and everybody that are out there making sure that our kids are safe, and I appreciate that greatly, because definitely I don't want to see any of our kids, anybody's children for that matter, in the hospitals. Along with the testing, did the state say that they would be providing the test? Or are we gonna have to come up with those?
With money, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with money and or with just providing, what's their logic on, where will we be sending them to get results back, and kind of the idea, because I know that there are places around here that are doing it, but you have to, schedule an appointment and everything else, so.
Yeah, those are great questions, and we haven't seen that detail yet. So
Okay.
I'm not expecting that we're paying for the tests. Yeah.
Let's hope.
But none of those details have come out yet, and I expect that they will, I hope by the end of the week. But I still think it's going to take a while to get this process off the road, off the ground, I mean, so.
And then the only other thing is, of the 279, how many of those are total classrooms? Do we have any of the total?
Let's see, Stafford still has 0, I hope, right? 0.
I like that.
But they had some at the beginning, but they're down to 0. And I said 33 for the high school, and so then you're talking about at the K through 6s, you're talking about specific classrooms. And then
Yeah,
some
the little
individuals
guys,
here and
yeah.
there, Yeah, I don't have that in my head.
Yeah, no, that,
I hope I brought that with me, actually. No, I just did total numbers, I didn't count
yeah,
classrooms.
no, that's fine.
Speak on that?
What's that?
Are they going to speak
Uh,
on that tonight?
Can the principal?
We might, let's see, we have Kate from Stafford, and Greg, I think, is here, and, there he is, and Carrie. So Carrie might be able to speak about that.
I wasn't sure if it was on there.
Yeah,
listed. Okay.
yeah.
Carrie,
Or Lauren or Patty?
do you have any total classrooms?
At RIS, we have quarantined 8 classrooms.
8 classrooms currently right now.
Currently, we have 7.
Lauren, I saw you. You have 2?
We have 2 right now. We've had 3 total.
Patty, what about you?
We don't have full classrooms. We've had all 4 houses impacted, but because of vaccines, we don't necessarily have to shut down
Right.
entire houses. At one point in time, we had 63 students who were quarantined, but based on vaccines.
And is
Okay,
Susan
all right.
here? I didn't see.
Anybody, other principals? Okay. Ann, you had your hand up?
Oh, I was going to ask, similar to what you asked, Brittany, did they give any, I guess they haven't given any idea when this is gonna roll out to schools. I guess I assume schools wouldn't be paying for it. Would it, I guess we don't know yet if it would qualify for ESSER funding or whatever funding. How is it gonna be paid for? Same question. And, the staffing, this is the test, as I understand it, that comes back in a few minutes, not a couple of days. It's the PCR test, right, is it called? Or it's the other one?
It's the antigen.
Antigen test.
Yeah.
So it's the quick test, and our staff will be able to do that?
That's how it's explained to us. Again, Ann, I don't know all the details. Basically what I've said is basically what's been explained. But I have been told that it's not going to be any less work, but it will keep kids in school. So I think there's going to be a good amount of work to process this.
Allison?
So yeah, I was going to ask the same thing about how it was going to be funded or obtained or all that, but it's still to come. Couple other points, some of the misinformation that was kind of discussed tonight. I do work in the medical field and am very versed in the data and our hospital being overloaded with many patients with COVID. And in fact, there are mask ratings for a reason. While the coronavirus is very small, it has to get out of your body via a droplet that can be stopped by a larger micron mask. So it's not as simple as the holes are so big that corona is going to escape out of everyone and your mask is useless. That is not the case at all. It is well studied. Unfortunately, we have over a year's worth of data on it now. So that is one point. Another point, the greater good, I believe, is keeping all our students and families safe. There are some that can't be vaccinated. There are immunocompromised students, immunocompromised family members, and wearing a mask is a simple way to protect them.
Okay, thank you. Other, Dina?
Just for the potential testing procedure that may take place, would there be an opportunity maybe to use some of the Esser funds to obtain more support for personnel to administer, because that's very COVID-specific type of.
Yeah, that's a possibility, Dana, for sure. That would be appropriate use of the money. I think it depends on how the process works, and, I'm imagining people coming into the building in the morning, we'd have, as explained to us, it sounds like there'd be some kind of a station you'd stop at and do a quick test, and either be in or not. And if we could find a way to hire someone, if there's people out there, that would be useful.
Just a quick, and maybe Allison, you might know this. I believe, because at the hospital, an LNA had done I had to have a test on. So I don't know as if we would have to have an RN, because they're very hard to find. Do you know if is it that they're able to train them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that might be something too that would help to use those funds for, be able to get a hold of, because RNs are so difficult to find right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now you're
Yeah.
bringing up our couple principals?
Yep, I think we have Kate and Greg and Carrie.
Okay. All right. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about the efforts that we've been making to ensure that our schools stay open and our students stay safe in the midst of the ongoing pandemic. I'd like to begin by saying how excited we are to have the students in school rather than remote. The energy in the building is palpable, and homecoming last week was a highlight as the students celebrated one another both in school and in the stands. It's great now to see science classes going outside to study nature, PLACE program students engaged in internships, and all of the students during lunch. I've been asked to speak with you today about the impacts that the pandemic is having on school and the process that we follow when someone tests positive. When we find out that someone has tested positive, that person is interviewed by the school nurse, and we do our best to recreate that person's previous few days during which they were contagious. This expands to administrator interviews of all of the students' teachers who have created and shared seating charts. Our goal in these interviews is to create a list of close contacts. That list is affected by the fact that high school students move between different classes and with different groups of students, and participate in activities such as choir and PE, and then after-school activities. By way of example, last week, and last week was a very busy week, we had separate lists of 65, 42, 50, and actually added an additional 12 at the end of the week. Each potential contact gets a separate phone call from an administrator or nurse to discuss the date of their last contact, vaccination status, and the date that they can return to school activities. We follow up those phone calls with separate letters for each student, which outline that important information. While these efforts are time-consuming and impact evenings and weekends, we as an administrative team recognize the value of keeping our schools open. Thank you.
Sure. So our students come to Stafford because they want to learn a skill or a trade, and it's hands-on, it's project-based learning at its finest. And we were really excited this year to have all of our students in person every day. We worked on a hybrid schedule like many last year, where in-person days were program-based and then remote days were academics. And our students, you could feel the excitement in the hallways. This year, our teachers were commenting on the resiliency of our students, how excited they are to be in our programs. And our first 3 days of school this year, we focused on relationship building, because some of our students hadn't been in our buildings before. Others, it had been a year before they'd been in a school building because of the pandemic. So by the end of the first 3 days, we had students practicing L&A skills, cooking pizzas, baking breads and cookies, working on their welding skills, using the virtual reality paint booth that we have in the auto program. And that's why our kids come to Stafford. That's why we're here. And then within the first couple weeks of school, we have students now fully out on co-op, doing a work-based learning experience. So it's really great to see everyone back and enjoying being in school. And we do what we do because we want to keep our schools open. And our students have commented on they're happy to be back in person every day. So like Greg mentioned, when we get word of a COVID positive case, the administrative team and the nursing team, we drop everything that we're doing, because our priority is to keep everyone safe and healthy and our schools open. And part of that is, the contact tracing piece, which can happen on a Sunday, right when you get back from the grocery store, but you have to do it for, we did it a couple weekends ago, it was 10 hours. And because Stafford's in a unique position, we serve 8 partner schools. We have 16 different programs. We have a blended model of academics. We have students out in the workforce. So that just complicates matters. we, kind of to walk you through the steps, we've been planning these mitigation strategies and implementing them for now a year and a half almost. And no matter how good the strategies are, the reality is COVID doesn't care, and so we want to keep everyone safe. So for an example, and this mirrors a case we've had a couple different times. We have one student in one program. They have 16 kids in their program and one instructor. That student is then in 2 academic programs in Stafford. Each class might have 20 students. So, and they're also going to other programs. It might include that student on a white day is at a co-op experience in the community, and that's 10 people out in the community who could be considered close contacts. They also ride the bus to and from their partner school. So we're trying to catch students who are close contacts before they even enter the building. And sometimes we've been on the phone with our nursing staff at 5:30 in the morning. But we do it because we want to keep our kids safe and our schools open. And we couldn't do it without the relationships that we have with our partner schools, with our staff, with our nursing staff. And, the silver lining is, I think it's brought us all closer together in understanding and being patient with one another. But we want our kids to be here every day, and we want to keep the schools open, so that's why we do what we do. And we're excited to have everyone back.
And at the intermediate school, we also are just so happy to have everyone in the building. And as much as last year having kids remote, we worked solely on building relationships, and we still do that, in a sense of community. We, this year, have rolled out our new expectations. We've had a lot of fun with that. It's good to see all the kids in the classrooms, walking through the halls. But that being said, we have had to quarantine. Before I say that, we follow the same, we get the call, we have to drop everything and make our main focus to keep the kids in the class and isolate the situation. So we have had to quarantine 137 kids at the intermediate school since the beginning of the school year, which has been about a month. We've had 8 classes that have had to quarantine. It's a little different at our level because our kids stay in their own class, in their own cohort. So if someone is testing positive, we need to isolate the whole classroom because they spend pretty much the entire day with them. When we do have a case, we look at outside of the classroom, do they have a small group that they go to? Is after school impacted through Tapestry? And of course, we have to look at the bus as well, so how they come in and out. Fortunately, as Kate said, we all are working so closely together. We have our seating charts for the buses. All of our after-school programs have seating charts. We have seating charts for the lunchroom, so we really can isolate when we need to because totally lost my train of thought. We need to isolate so that we don't spread it. And one thing that we are proud of is that we haven't had a spread in our building from a case that we've had. So what that tells us is that what we're doing is working. And understandably that it is an inconvenient for families sometimes. However, again, like they said, when you're calling families on Sunday night, they are very understanding because they know, that it's not what we were expecting to be doing, but that makes it helpful, knowing that they're supporting us. We never know when that next call is coming. We have, as I said, 137 kids, but we have a whole host more that we are watching and waiting. They might have a brother, they might have a parent that is positive, and therefore, they're staying home, but, we wait for their test results and see how that impacts. So, and as Bill said, most of our level can't get vaccinated yet. So when we are making those calls, and we have had to do that with sixth grade this year, we're hearing from the parents, nope, we're waiting until November, we can't wait for his birthday in December so that, they won't have to go through this anymore. So we know it's coming for our level, but, we still have to just keep holding on. So what we do is we emphasize the proper mask wearing, hand washing, sanitizing. Anytime we have a case, our custodians, again, it's that partnership. They are hitting that classroom extra hard, making sure it's clean, cleaning the common areas. So we're just really thankful for everyone's support, everyone's flexibility, and certainly their understanding. So, because again, our goal, just like everyone else's, is to make sure that our kids are safe and they're in school. I even had a student today in the cafeteria tell me, it is so much better being in the cafeteria because the food is better, they can have choices there. So this is a kid who hasn't been able to use the cafeteria in 2 years. So, they want to be in school too. So that's our goal.
Questions? Comments?
I had one comment. Thank you, Carrie, for touching on that. That's exactly what I'm referring to, is children in their excitement to be with their friends and connecting. So thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes.
I just want to say thank you so much. It sounds so overwhelming and difficult, and you're doing it over the long haul, and you must be exhausted. Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Brittany, then Kevin, and then...
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
At Stafford, are the partnering schools, have they been cooperative with you to be able to kind of help?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have a really strong relationship with the administrative teams at each school and our nurses. We work with the Rutland High School nurses, and they have great connections and relationships with our sending nurses. So
Have we had any crossovers from like something that happened, like a case at our school, and then say that the student then goes back and plays football at Fairhaven?
So like Carrie mentioned, when we get a positive case, as of right now, it's been outside of school.
Okay.
Of a regular school day. But adding in those soccer teams or the football team, it increases those contacts. So it just adds another layer, and that's why we work so closely together, to make sure we don't miss anyone.
Kevin?
And Stafford students are in contact with so many different people. You would think your school would have the most.
Let's not jinx
Somebody's
it.
doing a good job.
But yes.
Next Sunday night, call Kevin.
Our kids have been really great, and they understand, what's at risk, and they live through a full year of hybrid learning in a career and technical education setting, and it's not fun. So, we, like all of us here in the district, we focus on the hand washing, the mask wearing, and just being aware of your surroundings, and what you do outside of school may impact, what we're able to do during school.
Yes. Sir,
So-
your name, please?
My name is Eric Solsa, and the question is, so what is the mask mandates in schools for the different ages? Or is there different for the high school or for the middle school?
All the same.
All the same, and that is what?
Wear a mask.
Yeah.
So is that the same here,
Yes.
being a school thing? So why are we,
Just address the chair, sir, yes.
What is your question?
What's your question, sir?
I don't understand why we're not, can you wear a mask, please?
This is not about. Sir, thank
You just address the comments to the chair, please.
Well,
Yeah.
we have masks here.
Yeah.
Is it possible to ask for that we all be masked?
Yes, it is, because this is a city building and a city school district, and I can ask for it to be masked. Bill and I had this conversation earlier about it. I actually have the power to suspend the meeting according to the Vermont School Board Association until everyone is in a mask or compliant. And I was just kind of hoping to get through, and I understand your concern, and I will ask the two of you to please put a mask on that I see out there without a mask, because it's been called to that attention.
I do want to say that I do appreciate all the principals and the teachers. You guys have worked overtime and then some, but I just, thank you for all the reports, and you guys are great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, yes, back there, question? Address the chair, please.
Nick Aventel, Rutland City. I just was wondering, could you actually go through the process of when you contact trace, how that goes for each individual child? Like, what's the procedure that, does an administrator take that child aside and then proceed to question them about their activities over the course of however many days? Could you just elaborate on that so I have a better understanding of it?
Who would like to answer that question? Greg?
I think Bill.
One of you, Bill, whoever. Okay, go ahead.
I will.
Gary?
Because all of our cases have happened outside of our school building, kids have been home, so the parents call us to say that they have tested positive, at which point, so for us, the kids haven't been in school and tested positive, so when we get the call, I contact the teacher, and then it just goes from there. So then we start our contact tracing with, all right, who's been in that classroom, who's been out, where have they been? We notify the bus, we notify our tapestry, we get our list of who we have to call, we get a plan, the two assistant principals and myself usually are always the ones that make the calls. And then as Greg said, we outline that in a letter that's specific with what date was the last contact, what date those that were exposed could test, what date they can return if they're choosing not to get tested, contact the library so that we have Chromebooks for the students to take home. The teacher, most of the time, will put some work together in addition to that, and we start doling them out.
Right.
Just to add one more piece to it, which I think the question may be referring to, it's sort of, the first conversation is typically with the school nurse. So it's typically between the school nurse and a parent, and that's then when the interview is, okay, was your child in school for these days for school? We're checking attendance. But I think to address the point more directly, that starting point is with the school nurse, typically with the parent. It then, once the nurse has kind of recreated what that looks like for those days, administrators are talking to teachers, developing the list of students, and then going from there.
Did you hear that response back there?
No, I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so when when that range is out, is the nursing staff the one initiating all those, like going on to each student and then finding out who they had contact with, or is that administration?
So it starts, I'm sorry, I was facing this way. So it starts with a conversation with the nurse, typically with the family.
Yep.
And then they're kind of recreating that situation for the last few days. That's then when administrators are typically then talking to classroom teachers, looking at seating charts, and then progressing with phone calls. So the nurse continues to be involved, but it kind of starts with the nurse and then kind of gets turned over.
Thank you.
Allison?
So I think
And then Dina, I'm sorry.
maybe to clarify, you're only contact tracing the positive student. The other students are being notified that there's possible exposure, but they're not being questioned or contact traced because they.
Right, it's kind of a one-way conversation.
Right.
I'm notifying you that you have been a close contact. It's not sort of an interview, it's more heads up, sorry to break the news, and then we go from there.
Adina?
I think what people also have to understand is that when you create that conversation, when you contact trace people, there's possibility that your child may not need to quarantine if they were not on the bus that day. So all those questions are super important to know. When I was contacted by Carrie that day, when my child had to be quarantined for whatever days, we were trying to figure out, because it was a bus exposure, was she on the bus that day? Did we actually pick her up from school? We could have been excluded from quarantine if we had all those pieces in the right answers, but she was on the bus. So the sense of interrogation may be, you can have that sense, but it's also to get the most accurate data to exclude people from quarantine. It's not only to put you in quarantine, it's to exclude you from quarantine if that comes up and it's a real opportunity to do that. So I actually appreciate that extra detailed type of process, because if you're lucky and something went, in an opposite direction, you can be on the better side of the quarantine situation, so.
Thank you for saying that, because that has happened.
That has happened,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
And I just want to say I appreciate everyone's answers. I just kind of wanted to voice my concern in what this is potentially conditioning children for later in life.
Okay.
The big picture.
Thank you. Any other questions of our three administrators? Okay, thank you so much. I believe Mr. Bliss is up for summer professional development and then right into recovery planning update.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the time. With all that important discussion about COVID and contact tracing, I want you to know that the business of education, teaching, and learning just goes on continuously. And even though we have wonderful, caring people that do all this stuff, I want you to know that in addition to that, nobody's stopping teaching and learning. And Bill asked me to give you have a one-pager in your packet first, and then we'll talk with Abby about what she's got on Esser. This is about summer professional development and kind of the improvement work that went on this summer. I'm just going to highlight a few things for you and then see if you have any questions, because it's in your packet and you can read it. So the first thing I'll highlight in the second paragraph, 22 teams of teachers, including 113 people, spending 181.5 days of work to do instructional planning and improvement. Keep a hold of that. People work real hard in the summertime, and it's important that we have the time to move forward when people can breathe a little bit. Down under the efforts are included, I want to highlight a few things. Number 3, thematic planning of the year of the book. I want you to know both primary schools, and you've heard this in the student members' reports, both primary schools were granted a Cliff Grant Year of the Book grant. So all year, they had to go through planning for thematic instruction and lessons and how they're going to use these grants, the consultation and the extra books they're getting. That was really important at our primary schools. Number 9, middle school continues to focus on project-based learning and coordinating that so kids are more engaged. 13, trauma-intelligent curriculum and pedagogy. It's an ongoing effort in the district, and you might have heard that we have some Rutland Fellows and some people in the district that have done some excellent development, study, advisory, construction, lessons, professional development for our teachers, including psychologist Stacy Shortle at the high school, who's done an excellent job in her role, as well as many others. 18 is really important. We realized as we were assessing our students toward the end of the year that we had a lot of students that were probably going to be bumping up to the next level in a transition year, and maybe their math skills weren't where they should be. So not only did we offer tutoring and get ahead in the summer, but we also had a lot of planning on how we're going to instruct kids as they arrive at so many different levels of understanding. Number 19 is K-12 curriculum design and planning. That's a 3-year project at least. You'll hear more about it. On the back side of that, Ms. Reed and a team of special educators rebuilt the entire special education procedure manual. It's a white notebook like you read about in stories. It's 6 inches thick, and it has everything that you need to know if you're a special educator in Rutland City Public Schools. And then I want to pull one professional development of a local course offered. This is kind of actually local PD we had. We connected with Emily Reed Daniels from New Hampshire and Hear This Now organization, and she came and did professional development with all our primary school educators on what they call a regulated classroom. It's how to work with students who may need additional help in regulating their minds and bodies so they can be prepared for study. You can imagine coming out of a year and a half of a different type of engagement, most of our students could use some of that. So I'm just pulling out those highlights for you tonight, and I didn't know if you had any questions about that particular list, and if not, we can move on. But Mr. Chair?
Any questions on summer PD? Okay.
All right.
Turn it over to Abby and Mr. Blair. Oh, yes.
If we could, I see there's a lot of people that are standing and some free chairs. Like, I don't know if we can, like, get people chairs. There's one next to Kevin that no one's in. I don't know if anyone else will be at the table. I mean, it's been going on a while, so if people could shift some chairs and make everyone comfortable for this important topic.
All right. So just by way of introduction, as you know, we and all the schools in the state of Vermont have been granted some federal funds to try to prepare for, react to, and get ready for anything that has to do with COVID-19 pandemic or anything related to it. The business of going about investing that within the regulations, in the requirements, and in the time frame that they have is no small operation. So as a result, we use some of those funds to bring on a recovery coordinator. This is Abby Brodowski. Some of you may know Abby as she was an English teacher at the high school. Do either of you two have Ms. Brodowski? All right. I hope your grammar's intact. And so I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Brodowski, so she's going to explain a little bit about the Esr Grant and, what we're looking for in terms of meaningful consultation. One of the rules is we have to seek input from our community. And so, Abby, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. So I have a pretty quick video I'm actually going to show you to keep it concise, but it's helpful to know that part of our third round of Esser funding, a requirement is that we talk to as many stakeholders in the community as possible about how that money should be spent in order to be able to spend it. So at the very end of the survey, and I hope that PEG TV can pick this up, there is a short link to the survey. You can see the district's plan. You can also take a look again at this video if there's parts that you wanted to pause and really dig into. Because we want to hear from everybody that we can about how to spend the third round of funding, which is over $11 million. So it's really important that we hear from you. So I'm going to play that, and then you can feel free to ask some questions of Rob and I.
I'm Brodowski, and I am the Rutland City Public Schools Recovery Coordinator. The purpose of this video is to explain the Esr federal funding allotted to Rutland City Public Schools and how you can provide feedback on this process. Pause the video to read slides, as this overview honors your time by not reading the details out loud. Esr stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief and has come in 3 rounds of funding to Rutland City. The third round, Esr 3 or ARP, which stands for American Rescue Plan, requires meaningful community engagement and a process of feedback from the public on how we spend the funds. The Rutland City Public School District focuses spending through multiple lenses. First, we ask, what do our students need? Not what do we want, but rather what do our students need? Then the Esr Grant requires us to spend the funds in a way that prepare for, and respond to current and future pandemics. We also have to justify our costs by making sure they're allowable, reasonable, and necessary. This tricky question of recovery is important to how we move forward as a district. How do we recover and get back to where we were before the pandemic while simultaneously moving forward and evolving, making really great strategic use of the incredible financial resource that we have available for only a few years? The district has broken our plan into 3 areas: social emotional learning and mental health, engagement and truancy, and academic achievement. The 4th area, safe and healthy schools, is embedded in the first 3. You can see this Rutland City Public School District plan by typing the URL into your browser. Rutland City Public Schools district plans are balanced with school-based requests. Also, we aim to realize cost efficiencies while providing each school with the unique support that it needs. It's important for the district to balance its hopes and dreams with the allowed grant requirements. We also have to aim for sustainability in any of our spending choices, knowing that funding disappears in 3 years. As you prepare to answer our Esr survey, think about the RCPS vision for our community of students. Who do we want to become? And now it's your turn. Type the short link into your browser. You're welcome to submit the survey multiple times if you want to provide feedback in different roles. For example, you may be a teacher and a parent and have different things that you think should happen depending on which role you'd like to respond. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you.
So I'm going to leave that up on the screen to make sure that people get out your little pen and pencil and write it down. I've got paper versions of surveys. I've got extra information in the packet for board members, so you can take a look at that. And if you have questions, we're happy to answer.
Maybe I'll stand. Let me take my shirt. Any questions?
Questions?
Yes.
Allison?
Can we have a link, or do we have a link on the school website to link to the survey?
Yes, so there's two ways we push it out. We push it out via email, and we can link it on the website, as also we'll push it out through social media.
Perfect.
Those are the links.
So currently, what are some of the ideas?
Go back a few slides. I can tell you, the first time through, with the first round of funding, we spent almost that in its entirety on personnel to cover remote instruction and maximize space in the schools. So that was round one. Round two, which is ESSER 2, same thing. Almost most of what we've allocated to this point was targeted at these things up here. So we're looking to hire counseling, additional counseling for short-term social emotional health. We'll look for extra interventionists and special educators for academic achievement if kids need it, also professional development like you heard about. The engagement and truancy, we're talking about possibly getting some outreach people so that we can connect out. As you might know, there's not a lot of people out there that are ready to step up for almost anything, and so we're still looking for quite a few things. The safe and healthy schools, one of the big things for round 3 that's really possible is making sure our air quality is good. That's a no-brainer for trying to prevent the next pandemic or react to this one, and that is, so replacing things that might be holding dust or mites or things like an old carpet, or improving our air quality handling in the schools so that we can replace the air more frequently. Those are the first two big ideas that come in. Also, outdoor classrooms in each space. So not just for like if it was pandemic time, but it would come in handy if we needed to teach people outside, but they're going to be great outdoor spaces so that kids and teachers can, and maybe even parents, can meet outside and do that. And then finally, I would say it's all about trying to use this in a way, and I'll use Ted Clementis' word, this is a transformational opportunity. You know, how can we change our school district to follow these rules and regs and become who we want to be? That's where we're at.
To add to that, I will draw your attention to the little link at the bottom of this slide because you can read our whole plan and it is wonderful. It's a lot on it, but you're absolutely welcome to go in there. And I encourage you, if you're interested, to do that before you fill out the survey. The survey is going to ask you for input in these 4 categories. What do you think we should spend the money on? Tell us what you think of the plan. And then I go through, codify it, we make amendments to the plan based on what we hear and what people think needs to be done.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
You're very organized and very impressed and very technologically prepared.
I taught hybrid last year.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, comment?
Yeah. So as you know, students of color and LGBTQIA have been affected by this pandemic in disproportionate rates. Where is equity in your plan?
It's a great question. So the plan is for every Rutland City student, but in terms of feedback, we are required to make sure that we're getting feedback from every group and every set of stakeholders. So we'll be sending it out through Project Vision and also to individual groups and to individuals. So if anybody wants to take a look at what we've got and give us feedback on that specific thing or anything they're interested in.
Have you already sent that out? Or you're in the process of sending
We're
out
doing
to
it right
those
now, and actually when we're done, I'll grab the survey link for you right out of my bag and I'll give it to you, but if you have organizations or places that you want me to direct it, I'm happy to do so.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
And, ma'am, your name and your
My
residence?
name's Mia Schultz, and I am the Rutland Area NAACP president, and I serve Rutland City.
Okay, and you live in the city?
No, I do not.
Where do you live? Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, thank you. Finance Committee report.
Well, okay. All members were in attendance for the Finance Committee meeting. We had a little technical difficulty at the beginning, but we got through it. Basically, our agenda was to discuss the Esser Funds, which Abby we were lucky to have her. She is specializing in making sure we do, use the funds appropriately and in the timeframes required. And for those maybe in the back, as a school commissioner, there's a lot of acronyms to learn. So Esser, E-S-S-E-R, is Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Just so because we're just kind of using Esser, and I want everybody to understand what that means. So Abby, she gave us the same presentation at the Finance Committee, so you all saw what she was presenting, and we're just lucky to have her and making sure that where the funds are going on. And she gave the link, so please use the link. At the Finance Committee, we also talked about a timeline for the budget. We do have time set down. We have October, November, and 2 days we're going to meet in December, so we can make sure we're planning appropriately. And then the last thing that was on our agenda was to talk about our strategic plan, our long-term goals. And as you heard tonight with Bill Olson and the principals and Rob, there's a lot going on with just the COVID alone. And we really wanted everybody to focus on getting the kids back into class and making sure that they have the bandwidth to manage all of that on their plate and not put something else on top of that. So we decided as a group that we were going to put that off until the spring and revisit that discussion. And that was pretty much the gist of the Finance Committee.
Okay. Questions, Allison?
So also, one of the reasons to hold off on strategic planning is to see what we can actually do with these Esser funds and where that's going to go, because that could have a great impact.
Other questions? Okay. Ad hoc committee report?
So, the highly anticipated ad hoc committee report. So we met September 1st, and we reviewed the report that was distributed to everybody, that was created by the attorney that we hired from Burlington to review the process and procedure. We were assigned only to review process and procedure, nothing more than that. Our committee unanimously voted to adopt the report as a recommendation to the full board. And I'm just going to go briefly, and I hope that at least the other board members have had a chance to read the report and even watch the video of the meeting, so you can get kind of a little bit extra details that he was able to give us at the committee. So the bottom line is the conclusion of the report is that, and I'm going to read a little bit of the conclusion just so it is from the report itself and not in my words, is that despite the procedural deviation from Robert's rules, it is our opinion that the board president ran a meeting that was procedurally and substantially fair to the other school commissioner. Further, we note that while the chair of a meeting has heightened responsibility to ensure a fair meeting that is compliance with the established rule, all members share this responsibility. And at the very end of the conclusion, the recommendation that the law office have made is that at this point, the motion that was presented to the board and was voted on is a binding motion that is what it is, and they do not recommend any further action from the board. So, the other parts of the report, this is just as it relates to the motion, the other parts of the report that was recommended and that was already started to take some place is that They really encourage us to look at the Robert rules for small boards that are less complicated to follow, as the idea of the rules are to allow us to have a fair ran meeting that is organized and that we are adhering to the same structure, so it's not based on who's doing what at any point, but it's far less complicated in terms of the nuances and the multiple types of motion and things like that. So our policy committee, I believe, is looking into it because it is right now in our policy that we follow the regular Robert rules.
And I'm going to stop you right there. Just having been in the policy committee meeting, one of the things that policy, I think, and I'm not speaking for you, Kevin, is they kind of like to have a recommendation of the board that this gets deferred to policy committee so that they can look at it and bring it back to the full board.
The Robert rule.
Right, the Roberts rules for small boards.
Right.
So that would be one motion that we would take up.
The other recommendation have been, is what we've started already, which is our training and looking at further Vermont School Board Association type of training that will help us develop better type of processes. So a little bit of, of the reading part of the report, and if anyone has questions about the report itself that if you did not understand or get from watching the video, any one of us, I'm sure, can answer that. But we have to also reflect on the fact that this has been the longest lasting motion that I have been a part of in the last 5 years that have not been acted upon. So we are in this limbo situation for months now, and now we've completed this process and procedure reflection, and in the adaptation of the committee is the understanding that this is a binding motion of the board. So this is what we bring back to the full board at this point. And if Charlene or Ann or anyone else has anything else to add.
Can we make a motion? I think Kevin's committee would like a motion about the small boards.
So make a motion to bring this to the policy committee for them to develop.
Is there a second?
Policy. I'll second.
Okay.
What she said.
Discussion about using Robert's Rules of Order for small boards, referring it to the policy committee to check our policies, and one of the things that we have to look at is the city charter. So that's a referral, just to refer this item to policy. Questions? Yes, Ian?
First, I want to thank Dina for serving as the chair of that committee, and I thought you did an excellent and fair job, so I do thank you for that. It was a lot of time. I guess my thought on adopting Robert's Rules of Order for small boards, I don't know if we're evolved enough yet as a board to be able to kind of put away the rules and structure. So I understand that Robert's Rules is very cumbersome for people that are not experts in Robert's Rules. We're not indemnified. We're not, experts in Robert's Rules. But I personally think that it helps to keep some structure, and we need quite a bit of structure in our board meetings at this time. Thanks.
Alice?
I have the same sentiments. Robert's Rules of Order for small boards is designed for boards that function well and are small enough to yield and have appropriate conversations. Our board has demonstrated that they are not at that level. So I will vote no on referring it to committee.
Okay. Dina?
I think at this point, when we looked at deviation from the Robert rules, truthfully, if we honestly look at each meeting, there's deviation every single meeting. So and there's mistakes every single meeting, because it's almost impossible to adhere to that level of granulation. So I don't know the small board. I think it will be worthwhile looking into it to assist. In my mind, the Robert rule, and this is was not the focus of the committee, but when we were starting to pick things apart, it almost becomes a barrier right now to run meetings also. So it's kind of like the other side of the spectrum. Whether it's somewhere in the middle, or we're not ready for the small board one, but maybe we can get there. To me, the full Robert rules right now is it's almost like, if somebody wants to pick out mistakes and deviation and make it into something that's more than that, there's going to be some every single meeting, regardless of who's running it.
Brittany, then Allison.
And Dina, this is the referral of the attorneys.
He made that recommendation.
Okay, and when we send it to the policy board, we're doing it for them to look at it.
Right.
We're not asking for you guys to come, okay. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Allison?
So the way Robert's Rules works is the concerns and the deviations need to be brought to the attention of the board for its operating then. So if a board is functioning within Robert's Rules of Order, we don't have motions that sit around for 6 months because someone wants to fight and overturn something. So the structure, or the lack of structure with the small boards would not protect us from having any of those conflicts, and it would set us up for more.
Charlene, and then Ann.
I guess my concern is that the standards work, I guess, if everybody understands the standards, but I think we have a problem here because not all of us understand what the standards are, maybe, in this group. But I do understand there is a need for structure, obviously. And I'm not saying take away structure, but I would like to visit to see what the small board policies are, what the big differences are, and if it's not that big of a difference, and we can talk about what those major differences are, I'd like to explore that. But I think it's difficult for this board because not all of us know what the standard is, and I think that puts some of us at maybe a disadvantage and some at advantage, I'm not sure. I'm just putting that out there.
Okay, thank you. Ann?
One thing that I found a little difficult, and, you know, if Robert's Rules for small boards has some structure, that's great. I haven't been able to find something like, you know, a condensed version of Robert's Rules of Order for small boards. So, I mean, if there is such a thing, that could be a good start. What I have found is, like, you know, from different topics here and there, pulling from the big book of Robert's Rules of Orders. And I don't know if that is helpful. I'd like to see a publication that has, you know, some basic outlines of for small boards, if such a thing exists. I haven't been able to find it. But I'd be interested in having, you know, if that was a structured idea or
It was a recommendation from
recommendations, then that would be great.
It was a recommendation.
Yeah, Kathy? I'm sorry.
So in the policy committee earlier, Bill gave us a sort of a sheet that tells, that indicates what the major differences are. And so it would be, I feel like it would be interesting to explore that a little further. I was surprised, the points that were on that sheet, so that they weren't, it didn't seem as impactful as I initially thought when I first heard about the small boards version. So I think looking into it and just being able to see exactly what the differences are is not a bad idea.
Okay. Other? Yes, Kevin?
I would certainly love to have lots of people at a policy committee meeting talking about this stuff. I think it would be easier to discuss in that format rather than this format. Frankly, and like you, I was hoping that there would be a much smaller book of Robert's Rules for smaller boards, and that doesn't seem to be the case. And I'm not sure that, going into this, I have no idea whether I would choose the recommendation that the attorney made, or you know, stick with the main one. But I think, Charlene, your point is true. None of us really know all the details about the original Robert's Rules, let alone what for small boards would be, and that really makes it hard. We don't have an arbitrator sitting in at our meetings, which I think would be really great, you know, if we had I don't know if we want to pay for a parliamentarian to hang around and say, no, Robert's Rules does not say that, it says this, and this is how we should do it. That would be helpful, but I don't think we can really afford that. But
Other questions before we do a vote? I will ask for a roll call vote on this.
Wait, are we taking?
We're taking a vote on referring.
Just the referral,
Referring, what was the motion you made?
Referring the topic of adopting a small business board to the policy committee for them to evaluate, and I'll add in maybe the differences between what we're running now and what a small
Okay.
board would use.
All right?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, roll call vote, please.
Okay.
Yes means you want to refer, no means you don't want to refer.
Brittany,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Dina,
Yes.
Kevin,
yes.
Allison,
No.
Tricia,
Yes.
Charlene, Kathy,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So, yes, witness.
So 1 no?
Yep.
So the motion does carry. Okay? Anything else? Okay.
Oh, Daddy.
Oh, yes. Question.
Oh, thank you. Melinda Humphrey.
What's that?
Melinda Humphrey, Rutland City.
Yep.
I wasn't intending to speak, and it's been a while since I've spoken in public, so bear with me, please. I'd like to go back to the motion that the report was originally about. As Dina mentioned, this motion passed and has been sitting for quite some time now. It was sent to committee. There was a lawyer hired and reported out on the findings of that, the report that we heard tonight. So I guess as a city resident, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, so what are we gonna do now? What's next?
The next would be we just move forward going from here unless further motions come up. That's all I know. Okay?
So, could I follow up to that, please? So the motion as stands is that the mascot, we have a new mascot, correct? So we're going to.
Yes,
So
yes.
we're moving forward with that. then,
Right.
correct? Because that was
This had nothing to do with that. This
before.
was the procedural issues that were involved, yes.
Okay, so we're now moving forward with a recommendation to the full board as came out of that report that the motion stands and our new mascot is.
Right,
correct?
right. And in
That's
that,
correct?
in that same, right, in that report, yes.
Okay.
Mhm. And that was for the procedures, yes.
Well, that the procedure was correct, that the mascot, or that the motion to change the mascot
It was
stands
understanding, according to, I believe the report said that it did lack, it had some deviations, but the understanding of the board was,
Yes, it's a valid binding motion.
okay, yeah.
So that there's no question, I'm sorry. So we're all, so the board is in agreement then that the mascot of Rutland Public Schools is.
I don't believe that the board is in agreement, ma'am, and I cannot prevent a future motion coming up in the next year or two, whatever, to change anything, just like this motion came up. I can't guarantee any of that to you as chair. But as of right now, I can tell you that the mascot is the Ravens, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Ann?
I'd like to make a motion that the board accepts the report from this attorney.
Yeah, and that's something I asked you to do.
Are
Yes,
we
you
getting
can make a
that?
motion to,
Okay.
yeah,
Go ahead,
Yeah.
do it.
I didn't want to take that
No,
away,
no,
I just
it's
thought we
all
were
right.
moving away from
No,
that.
no, I was looking for that motion, yes, so.
Well, go ahead.
No, you can run the motion.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to accept this report from the attorney and
Okay,
its findings, with the understanding that we are going to bring the, because it just passed a motion, we're
Yeah.
going to bring the Roberts Rules for Small Boards to committee to discuss and examine and explore. And that we're also working on the recommendation, the other two recommendations about training. We're currently in process of
Yes.
that.
Yeah, they are in
We
process
continue
now.
to- And we continue to move forward with that.
Mhm. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. Hearing no discussion?
Hold on.
Oh,
I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion, and I would like to propose that we accept the report, the findings from the attorney, And with knowing that the training is undergoing and that small boards has been referred to policy and move forward as the Rutland Ravens.
I second that
I
motion.
don't believe that that was not the intention of this ad hoc committee. This intention.
Excuse me, point of order, but the agenda says mascot, moniker, action item. The finding of the attorney was that the vote that the board had taken was binding. That is
Right.
factual, it stands, so it can be in my motion.
It stands as of today, yes.
Exactly,
it does.
and that is my
It
motion.
might not in a month, but as of today, it does. You're
And
right.
my motion is in there as well.
Okay,
That's not funny.
I'm okay with that.
Nobody wants to second.
Ian, are you okay with the amendment?
Yes, I'm okay with the amendment.
Brittany?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so we have a problem?
I second the
Yeah.
amended motion.
Huh?
I can second the amended
You
motion.
can second the amended motion.
Kathy already did.
All right. Kathy already did.
Okay.
So it
Okay.
has the floor.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay, hearing none. Roll call vote, please, for the motion as amended. Go ahead.
Brittany,
No.
Ann,
Yes.
Dina,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Tricia,
No.
Charlene,
No.
Kathy.
Yes.
I'm a no. So there's 4 no's and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses.
So the motion carries. Okay.
Good job, y'all.
So now, let's continue on with the weighted study update. Who does that? Ted?
I think you have.
Can I speak?
Sure.
I'm raising my hand about the ad hoc.
Yes.
Am I allowed?
We've already taken care of it, but
Can't I speak about something that's on the agenda?
yes, you can.
Okay. So my name is Marisa Kiefaber. I live in Rutland City.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, a follow-up to Melinda's question, now that the Ravens have been officially adopted again. It's been almost a year since we removed the Raiders, and since we have not had a current mascot or name. I'm curious about the board and the principals that are here today. What are our next actionable steps? Because we cannot sit in limbo as a community, as students, as staff. We need to move forward, especially because of this pandemic. Our kids are completely in limbo. I teach at Rutland Town. I can speak to my students. I'm assuming other students feel the same. So board, superintendents, principals.
Bill, would you like to answer
What
that
can we do?
question?
We can, last year, I think, we put together a package of what we thought the cost would be for making those changes. And we gave that to the finance committee. And so we still have that available. We don't have money budgeted for that, so we'd have to look for where we're gonna get that. I think at one point, we talked about contingency as a possibility to make some of those changes. We also talked about, with our uniforms, for instance, we cycle those uniforms over multiple year cycles, some longer than others depending on the sport. So we'd have to make a determination whether we would do that all at once in one fell swoop or follow a cycle. And not all the uniforms need to be changed because some of them just say Rutland. But we did sort through all of that and try to get a sense of what that would look like. It's a significant amount of money, and we'd have to determine whether we want to make those changes all at once or draw that out a little bit. Some of it is easy. Some of it, like for instance, the floor at the Keefe Gym that's a significant job. So
you would come to us for the contingency.
So we
if
could come back
need
to
that.
you
Okay.
next time and say, here's what the costs are, and here are the possibilities, and we'd have
Okay.
to ask for spending on contingency.
Okay. Yes.
I would like to, in follow-up for what she said, to say, adopt a timeline for this, because this has been a year and over a year, and there has been so much delay that a timeline, regardless of the budget, like, you have plenty of time to figure out where the money has come from. So I would propose that you all start thinking of an immediate timeline for this to happen, considering the events today. It's just a comment.
Thank you. Just a minute. Yeah. Aaron?
Would the committee be formed for this?
We can. It
Would
would
that
have to
happen
be a
today?
balance committee. I can form a balance committee for this, and I will see who wants to sit on it. I will start with that, yes.
Define a balanced committee.
Both pros and cons, just like the last committee was, I was not.
But this is about a binding vote of the board moving forward.
Every vote's a binding vote. Yes.
Since we're really on public here and everybody really is concerned about this issue, my biggest concern is the K-12 curriculum for equity, for inclusion, for diversity, for culture. That's one. Please be quiet.
Hey!
She has the floor.
Want to know, and if we want to do, it's not you, honey, her. So if I want a timeline, curriculum is important to me. That's why we're all here, for education. So, you know, regardless of what the moniker and mascot, who we are, we're here to educate the students, and I believe we need to educate culture, history, present, everything, but we need to learn, and we need to discover and explore. And we can fight and bicker about a name all day long, but...
That is the name.
Right, okay, fine, but either way,
Okay,
it's
fine.
still the curriculum that I think it needs to be also focused on, to understand how
Focus on your racism.
to teach that it's racist, or how to teach the
racist.
inequities.
Get rid of
All right,
it.
But I do really think that we should be taking our focus to education, to helping the students, just like the
And this is
principals.
part of education.
I agree, ma'am. I
I'm
do
going
agree,
to
ma'am.
call, as chair of the board, I want to call an end to this discussion. We will be moving on now. If there's anybody who wants to have an agenda item on the future agendas, as far as curriculum and all of that goes, we certainly can. Yes, Allison?
As chair, you can't just call a question. Everyone has an opportunity to
There's
speak
not a
afterwards.
motion on the floor. I don't have to call it.
I'd like to make a motion to form, and in the policy committee, I just actually read in Robert's rules that
Yeah.
anyone can make
Right.
a motion for a subcommittee, that I would like to make a motion to form a committee to come up with a timeline and the costs associated with moving forward with the Ravens.
Right.
I
okay.
second that motion.
All right, there's a motion to develop a timeline. There's a motion to develop a timeline for this implementation. Is there, to form a committee for the timeline for this implementation, is there discussion? Okay, yes.
I mean, I think that there is, any member of the board should be able to serve on the committee. I don't think that it should be prescribed or assigned.
Okay, that's fine.
I think based on our training that we just had a few weeks ago and how we need to be a voice of one board and we need to drop politics, I believe that having a fair voice in general, based on what we've been asked to do by our attorneys, that we should make it fair, that we haven't.
Anybody, I will make this an open committee, anybody can sit on it. Okay? Yes, Dina?
I think we should include the people that will have to administer this change, so there has to be somebody that is...
We'll let the committee decide which administration to make sure that attends the meetings. Yes. Okay, yes.
And can I say, we've been here for how long, and I would really like to appeal to everybody, the commissioners on this board, can we just drop the contention, please? Can we please just try and get along? Because this is hard to sit here when we have this. I'm begging you, I'm asking you to please.
Indigenous
Okay,
children and people of
so
color to
let's-
continue to
all right.
be degraded with that symbol.
Yes.
Also, we were told, and it's been reiterated to us, that when we hear people speak, which we'd like to hear from the public, but they do have to be Rutland residents.
No,
So
we did not hear that.
It actually came from a lawyer, but, okay. And
I
so
served the Rutland
we
area.
have to, excuse me, I have the
Okay.
floor, that they have to be Rutland City residents. But again, I go back to the training that none of us have.
Let's
clearly-
focus the comments on the motion to establish a committee. Okay, that's where our focus is right now. Is it on the committee?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think the task of the committee moving forward and moving beyond this issue is what can move the board forward. If we keep rehashing it, it will stay divided. We need to move
I'm not
forward.
against any of the things that we're discussing here, and the policies and the content. I'm just talking about our attitudes and the way we come across, and everybody's just angry. Can we just tone it down a little bit so we can get through this?
All right. Can we take a vote now on forming the committee to discuss the timeline for this change?
Do you need a motion?
It's a motion's already been on the
Need a
floor.
second?
I seconded it.
Okay.
And it will be the open committee.
Yes, an open committee for all members who deem to go. Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Sorry,
Okay,
was that unanimous or?
that was unanimous, yes. Okay, so let's talk about the weighted study. Who has the floor for that? Ted?
Thanks very much. Sorry I came up prematurely before. I don't need much time. I'm circulating just a couple of simple charts that are intended to be a couple of brief talking points to update you on where the weighting study is. A lot has been going on. One of the key messages is that the task force that was formed by Senate Bill 13 consists of 8 committee members, as you might recall, 2 from each of the 4 committees out of the House and the Senate that were involved in the legislation. This task force, which is strictly a legislative task force, was charged with conducting a number of public meetings for information gathering, including various experts as well as the public. They are now halfway through their schedule of these meetings. They've completed 6 meetings, which included 1 public hearing in September. They have 6 more meetings to come. I want to mention that several members of this board, as well as many constituents in the community, have been actively involved in this initiative, supporting its actions and goals. I thank you for that. We had the first public hearing on September 8th. Approximately 40 people registered to speak and offer their comments, up to 3 minutes each. All of them were unanimously in favor of moving forward with the recommendations of the UVM weighting study, which was very encouraging from our point of view. As you can see there from one of the bullet points, the speakers were from all backgrounds and avocations, and so we got quite an interesting perspective and profile. There are 3 meetings coming up in October, including a second public hearing, which is to be scheduled probably in the last week or so of October. I would encourage anybody who has the interest and who hasn't had an opportunity to testify and to speak at the first hearing to potentially go ahead and register to voice your opinions. They're very, very important. Let's see, so we've got those meetings. 2 more meetings are coming up in November, and then a final meeting on December 1st, which precedes by just 2 weeks the deadline for the task force to issue its report. In terms of the task force direction on the second page, the third page, the second chart, I gave you a quote here, which is on the website that the task force has established, and I think it's important to think about these words. It says, "The task force will recommend to the General Assembly an action plan and a proposed legislation to ensure that all public school students have equitable access to educational opportunities. The recommendations are due to the General Assembly by December 15th, 2021. Those are very important words, you know, that they have equitable access to educational opportunities. But the next question is, what does that mean? And if anybody is interested, you can go into Senate Bill 13 and read a little bit more about the details that underlie that. To me, what's very interesting and what does have relevance for our district as well as other districts that may be considered to have been underweighted in the public funding formula for the last 20 years, is some of the charge also includes that this task force should recommend how to transition to the recommended weights and categorical aid to promote equity and ease the financial impact on school districts. And I'm emphasizing that to you because, of course, there's already a system of categorical aid in the state. Some people are thinking about expanding categorical aid in lieu of implementation of the recommended weights, because the charge is recommend how to transition to the recommended weights and categorical aid to promote equity. So this bears watching, and it bears thinking about, and it bears potentially expressing your opinions to the task force. Because again, Senate Bill 13 says that the task force should consider the relationship between the recommended weights and categorical aid and changes to special education funding. So what's really interesting about the language of the bill and the charge for the task force is this language doesn't say implement the weights as revised by the UVM study. This legislation is drafted to say recommend how to transition to recommended weights and categorical aid. That's a big spectrum, and where the task force is going to recommend we end up on that spectrum will have very significant consequences for educational funding in this state. And therefore, they have another provision that says consider the interaction between the recommended weights and categorical aid and the goals and outcomes of the various acts. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of board members and other constituents who have been very supportive of this effort. Some of you may have seen within the last few days a commentary by Representative Kornheiser, who serves on the task force. And in that, I'll quote to you, she says, "We'll explore every idea, rely on trusted data, and stay centered on the experience of students and educators." Those all sound like very ideal and admirable goals, but they're also very broad, because when you say explore every idea, that can mean then don't necessarily implement the recommendations of the UVM weighting study regarding those weights. So I'm not sure where this is going to be going, and for that reason I say possible directions could be a wide band at this point in time, and as I said, the task force is only halfway through its meeting. So this is an opportune time for people who have the interest and would like to express opinions to go ahead and to do so very actively between now and December 1st. These issues obviously are complex, and the landscape is very challenging, so those of you, again, who have some familiarity and expertise, that now is the time to be involved. So that is all I had planned to bring to your attention this evening, but I'm glad to answer questions.
Kathy first, and then Allison, then Ann.
I'm asking you to confirm, I'm under the understanding that if the weights as suggested by the UVM study are adopted, it will also mean lower property taxes in our city. And so it's just another reason to really voice support of adopting the recommendations of the study.
So a lot of times to a question in business or finance or economics, you'll hear me use the following answer: it depends. And I don't mean to be funny about it, but it really does depend. Some people like to say the devil's in the detail, okay? So let's unravel your question for a moment. There were several simulations done by the UVM Rutgers team, okay? And those simulations were based upon some different assumptions. One of the simulations that was done, but not all of them, one of the simulations estimated that if you did implement the weights as recommended, using actual data from either 2000, I think it was 2019 or 2020. In other words, old data, which have changed. But if you use that data and ran the weights, then that would have the effect, all of the things being unchanged, that would have the effect of changing tax rates across the towns and supervisory unions and districts. For Rutland City Public Schools, in simulation, I believe it was B1, but there's some other name for it. In that one, it would have, for that year, taken our effective tax rate from about $1.45 per hundred down by 31 cents to $1.14 per hundred. In other words, about a 20% drop. Now, since the goal is to provide more educational resources for students in need, whether that need comes from, economic issues, social issues, there are a lot of people who say, well, if we go in this direction, you should not let districts or towns lower their tax rate. You should recognize that that will give them extra taxing capacity, let's say at the current rate, that will bring in additional funding potentially, then that should be used to meet those needs. So many senators and representatives are saying, even if we go ahead and implement the weights as they were recommended by UVM, no changes, then we also should put in a condition that says, and by the way, you can't lower the rate. You can keep it the same, and it may prevent you from experiencing continued increases over the next few years. So that topic is up for discussion, which is why, Kathy, I say it depends on how it's done. And, I'll say I've only been, as you know, I've only been in this position for a little more than a year, so I still have more to learn than I know, but I have learned enough about the educational funding mechanism and process to realize there are very few people who really understand it, and it is far more complex than many people appreciate. And because of that complexity and the interaction of factors, if you make a change over here, there may be an unintended consequence over there. And very few people have the knowledge to understand those interactions. So the task force was charged with proceed carefully. Now, the last thing I'm going to say on this, because I know the answer is probably longer than you wanted, but I feel I have to be complete, is that Professor Tammy Colby from UVM and other highly recognized scholars who were on this study team have been very clear to say, don't cherry pick the results, because this was done holistically on one basis. And if you start picking this and picking that, it changes the whole model. And you would basically have to rerun and see what it would look like. So for people who might say, oh, let's use some weights for this and some categorical aid for that, that will then not have any relationship to the simulations and recommendations that were done. Now, the task force and other people may say, well, okay, then we'll make our choices and we'll model again how it would look. And if you go through that process, empirically and analytically, as the scholars did, well, okay, then you'll have a good answer. But if you don't, you won't.
Allison?
So I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize the superintendent to expend $3,000 in support of the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity for their oversight, lobbying, and publicity. We had invested in the springtime during that legislative session, then this task force is causing the work to go on throughout the year, and then, of course, we will have another legislative session as well.
Okay, so this is over beyond the original 3,000?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
May I offer the board a comment about that as you discuss it? What's very important about what Commissioner Knott is saying is that once the task force delivers its report in mid-December, and that report's going to go to all 4 of the committees that have been involved to date, then there will be extended and further deliberations during calendar 22, where those committees are now going to say, okay, great, thank you for the proposed legislation. Now we're going to go through the legislative process and decide, do we want the bill to look like this? Do we want the bill to look like that? Is it going to have this categorical aid? Is it going to have those metrics? So what Allison is saying is there's going to be a lot more work to be done to track how this thing evolves once the task force has completed its work. And therefore, if you were to ask me from a financial standpoint, I would say this is probably one of the highest returns on investment that the district has had to date in my tenure. So that's just my financial advice.
I'll second that for discussion.
Okay. Ann?
I want to thank Allison and Ted for the countless hours that you've spent advocating for this, learning about this, testifying about this. Thank you very much. It's a worthwhile cause. So for the people that aren't finance guys, so the way I'm hearing this, categorical aid or block grants is kind of like, I call it a Band-Aid. We might get a grant, we might get some money thrown at us this year, this month. but next year we may not. If the model is changed system-wide, sounds like it would be more consistent, and it could help us would help our district more consistently and in the longer run. Am I understanding that on a basic level correctly?
So what you're saying is consistent with many observations that have been made. So what you're saying makes sense to me. I'm going to be careful here, Ann, because again, due to the complexity, what some people would say is, well, I don't necessarily agree with you about categorical aid. During the first public hearing in early September, many of the 37 or 40 people who testified were very concerned about categorical aid and block grants for the reasons you described. It's a year-to-year thing. I don't know if you're going to increase it or if you're going to decrease it. I don't know if it's going to be subject to this person's political whim or that person's political whim, or this particular priority this year versus that. In other words, it could be anything. It makes it extremely difficult to plan. Whereas other people might say, oh, but I can guarantee you I'm going to give $50 million to this categorical grant every year. I'll increase it for inflation. Don't worry. So that's a plausible argument as well, if that holds. Of course, once that legislator turns over their seat to a new legislator and somebody else comes in, they may have a totally different opinion, so then that argument, maybe doesn't hold water. So again, it depends on what assumptions you want to make. I will say that I believe a majority of people that I've been listening to and that I would tend to agree with would say what you said a moment ago. To the extent that you can agree upon an updated set of metrics that hopefully is not so complicated that people can't understand it. But, here's the rationale, here's what the metrics are designed to do. Theoretically, the state ought to update those metrics periodically, maybe every several years, 5 years, don't wait 20. But at least then you would have, I don't want to say it's on automatic pilot, but it would be done by the numbers with some more objective, factually based basis. And there is merit in that as well. Personally, could you find a combination that says I'm going to do it with the metrics and then I feel like certain things are so important that I want to supplement those with some additional categorical aid? Maybe that's the better solution, a combination. I personally have always found the real answer is somewhere in the middle. Neither extreme is usually very good for whatever reason. So I personally believe you're on the right track, but again, I wanted to be complete and say there are plenty of people who would disagree with you, as well as being plenty of people who would agree with what you said. So I hope that helps.
Okay, and we do have a motion on the floor.
Oh, okay, I was just gonna.
Yeah, about the $3,000?
Yeah, Ted, we have money for it?
Well.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we gotta think about.
At the end of the day, this year's budget is a $58 million budget. So, with everything all in, we always include some contingency in there for the unexpected. So if you're asking me, Brittany, can I find $3,000 without taking it away from a teacher, the answer is yes.
Hey, you got my vote.
All right, is there anybody else that has a comment about the motion on the floor? Allison, could you read your motion again?
So, so the motion on the floor was that the board authorize the superintendent or CFO to expend $3,000 to the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity for their oversights and efforts in lobbying and publicity for the waiting study implementation.
Okay. All right.
You have a second?
Ann already seconded, so
Okay.
now we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much,
It
Sergeant.
was a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Ted.
All right. We have a need.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Oh, guys, we have a motion.
We have a motion, I entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing contractual matters and confidential attorney-client communication, the premature release of information regarding those subjects which would place the board at a substantial disadvantage. And we're inviting Ted, Bill Olson, and Rob.
Okay? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of going into executive session?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are going into executive session once the room is clear.
Thank you all for coming.